don't know. Have you seen the headlines this week? Food inflation is the highest it's ever been and it's set to get worse. So I actually thought this would be a good time to show you this video. This is how I've built up my pantry over the last maybe 18 months, 2 years. I have a food budget, and as you know, I go around looking for bargains. But I was always brought up, my parents, my grandparents, they learnt from the Great Depression it makes sense to have a decent stockpile behind you. For whatever reason, I actually took early leavers initiative from where I used to work. So I've been living on quite a low budget for the last couple of years until hopefully more income comes in. But I relied on this stockpile that I've built up. So it makes sense to get it built up if you possibly can do. And this is how I did it. So I bought bargains where I could, and with the money from my weekly budget I started to buy the basics to build up a prepper pantry. I have an ordinary pantry and then I have a prepper pantry which is there in case of emergencies. So this is how I started to build my pantry up. But of course you have to work around what you use and what you eat. There's no point in buying things if you're not going to eat them. For instance, I don't like baked beans, whereas baked beans would be a staple. But I have actually got a couple of tins of butter beans. So I have a regular food budget, and if there was any money left over, I actually started to buy the basics, and this is what I call the basics. A packet of spaghetti. If all you can afford 1 week is a packet of spaghetti, buy a packet of spaghetti, and if you like spaghetti, and put it on one side. And again with porridge oats. They're a nice staple to have. A couple of cartons of long life milk. And another one that I call a staple is a bag of rice. So I would buy those. At the end of this video, I will show you how much these staples would cost now to buy them now, and we'll compare with different supermarkets. But here I've just got an example, so I would buy the basics first and then move on to more to the further down the line. I would be buying soup, maybe some peaches, coffee, and then I've got some tuna as well. But if you do see a special offer, do you remember ages ago I actually saw that lovely soup? I'll just see if I can get a tin. This is that soup that was reduced from 1.70, maybe last year I think it was, down to 10p. And I actually bought about 5 or 6 tins, I can't remember. But that's a perfect example, whereas if you see something with a good date on it, it makes sense to buy it and put it in a long-term pantry. So there'll be weeks when I've got a little bit of money spare and I might just buy a packet of Savers spaghetti or whatever brand, whatever supermarket their basic range is. This works out about 30p now, and the peaches, for instance, are about 34p. But as I say, I will go out and price everything out and let you know later on in this video. But if it's a week where I've got £1 or 2 spare, although I do like fresh coffee, this will keep longer. So I would buy maybe a tin of coffee, and that's just how I do it. But with inflation set to go even higher, it makes sense, if you possibly can, to start building up a longer term pantry. Just for, who knows, there may be job losses coming, or with the bills rising. If you've got a pantry that you can rely on, then that week you could be putting extra money towards your bills, because the government subsidy now has ended, so we're all £66 a month worse off. Anyway, let's have a look at the prices. Right, I'm back. I went to Lidl and Tesco to compare prices, like for like, as much as I could. I do know that you can get rice packets, the basic one, for 45p, but I've had that and I found it boiled into the water, and I much prefer the long grain rice, so that's what I've compared it to. So this is what I found out. There's not an awful lot of difference in it really. The porridge oats at Lidl is 70p, and again at Tesco's it's 70p. So that works out the same. The spaghetti, the absolute basic spaghetti at both Lidl and Tesco's is 28p. And the long grain rice Lidl wins out there is 95p. And at Tesco's it's £1.40. Now this surprised me. I'm sure the last time I bought long life milk it was about 65 pence, something like that. It's now at Lidl gone up to 95p. And at Tesco's it was even dearer at £1.20, although they did have a bulk buy offer. Chicken soup, the absolute basic range, 57p, and Tesco's basic range, 57p. The peaches, 34p, and again at Tesco's, 34p. They did have it in packets, the tuna, at 4 tins for £2.59 at Lidl. But Tesco's, again, it was a bulk buy and you did have to have the club card in order to get the discount. But it worked out £2.80 for their own brand tuna fish. Butter beans were 59p. As I say, I don't like baked beans, and I couldn't find any at the Tesco's that I went to, but they did have these broad beans, so I thought that was a similar sort of comparison, and those were 65p. The instant coffee, the one that I've got here that I showed you, is £1.49, and it's the decaf there. Now they only had larger decaf coffee at Tesco's, so I didn't think that was a really good comparison, but they did have regular coffee, instant coffee. Their own brand there, look, or their basic range brand was 92p. So all in all, for just one of everything that I've got here, at Lidl, if you were to buy that today and start your own pantry up, or wanting to start to build your own pantry up, it would work out at £8.46, which is $10.47 or €9.60. And not that far off really, and we did try and do like for like. It's £8.86 at Tesco's, $10.96 and €10.05. But just a word of caution I thought I must tell you, is if you're storing tins of food, do make sure when you're buying them, have a good look at them and make sure that they're not dented or there's any little holes in them. Well, you should be doing that anyway, when I do that anyway when I'm buying food. And especially if you're storing things, you don't want the packets to be opened or holes in them. So just have a mind when you're looking out for things, you know, have a look at the packaging and make sure it's all intact. And of course, when you're storing things, you'll be adding the odd thing to it. But do remember to date rotate your stock, so that you, as you're taking, if you think of how much you actually need, and then if you add new things, take the older things out and use them up. But do rotate your stock as well. So actually, I didn't think that was bad. But as I say, if you're starting to build your own, or you're just starting to build a pantry up, do start with the basic things first. And it does build. It soon builds up. A packet of spaghetti here, a tin of peaches or something there. And then when you've got a little bit more money, maybe a jar of coffee.